So I'm going to kind of stall while we get everything switched. Let's see if it works. Oh, I need to unlock my computer. Technology, right? Wait for it, wait for it. You're going to see my beautiful children. Let's see here. It's working. Now the goal is to see if the clicker works, right? So as you all can tell, I am not from Brazil. I am from the United States. I am from northern parts of the United States, and super privileged to be here. This is so cool. I came down here for a conference, Agile Trends. Anyone heard of the Agile Trends conference? It's a big Agile conference that happens here, and I highly recommend you check it out. A lot of great content that happens there. So I presented there on Monday, and we have Andre in the back, who is from Atlassian. He's in São Paulo, and I said, Andre, if I'm going to be here for an event, can we make it big? Can we do a lot of things? And he says, I can hook you up. And so we've been doing customer events. I says, let's do an ACE. And so thank you all for your willingness. You all had a huge event here. Actually, it says it right on the back of my shirt. Right there on the very bottom, you had São Paulo as one of our last Unleash events, which was huge. So super excited that you're all willing to come out today. I'm going to talk about a concept that's really I'm passionate about, and it's this idea of modern work and how we really need a revolution in how that works. I will be doing this in English, so if you do need headsets, grab some headsets. I don't know any Portuguese. I'm so sorry. I've been trying. I've talked to Andre, and he's going to teach me a few words.
Bom dia.
I don't know what that means.
Good morning.
Good morning. Bon dia.
Bon dia.
Did I get that right? Did I get it right? Huh? Bon dia. There we go. Bon dia. I'll get one phrase before I'm done. Okay. All right, let's just see. I'm going to see if this clicks and it works. Oh, it does. All right, I'm going to go backwards. Don't see that. Don't see that. There we go. All right. So let's introduce myself then real quick. So I've been with Atlassian almost 5 years. My role at the company is a cool one. It's one I kind of created for myself. It is that of a modern work coach. And what that means is I spend most of my time coming out to communities, coming out to conferences, going to our customers, and not necessarily talking about our products, but talking about our ways of working. How we actually work inside of Atlassian. Because honestly, there are 100 tools out there that do very similar things to Atlassian products. But what makes them special is how we use them. Was it the quote, fool with a tool is still a fool? And I love that quote because it really emphasizes the point that you have to have good practices. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm excited about it. So let's get into this thing. So modern work. For me, when I think about modern work.
You said you were going to chat with me.
What was that? What am I going to do?
I understood that you're going to chat with me.
Oh,
no problem.
We're good.
I'm sorry.
We're good. We'll do that at the end. So we've got modern work. So when we think about modern work, one of the things that comes to mind is 4 or 5 years ago, there was this big push about looking into the future. Work futurist roles, things like that. My boss, his name is Dominic Price. You've probably seen him on some stuff. His title is still Work Futurist. The problem is 4.5 years ago, nobody could have predicted what would have happened around the world. No one would have predicted everybody working from home, trying to figure out how they actually work differently. And so for me, one of the things I found in my role is that it's fun to talk about the future of work, but it's practical to talk about modern work, which is how we work today. Because really, when we think about the future, we had these images in our head. It's fun to imagine. Remember, anyone see this movie? Minority Report? It's an old one. It's actually takes place technically in 10 years from now. I'm still waiting for the flying cars and the sweet haptic gloves, you know. But this was something where when we thought about modern work, when we thought about the future work, this is what we had in mind. The thing is when I look at stuff like this, I'm like, are we actually good at predicting the future? And I think about that, I'm like, huh. And so I went and looked back at a couple examples. You're probably familiar with some of these examples. So let's talk about the first one here. Blockbuster Video. I don't know, was Blockbuster a thing in Brazil back in the day? Right? It was a big thing, right? There's one left in the world, you know that, right? One left at Portland, Oregon. But Blockbuster back 2009, they had an opportunity to purchase a small company. Easy $50 million for them at the time. There's a small company called Netflix. Netflix wanted to be sold. They were like, no, their founders, they wanted out. They wanted to sell. Blockbuster's like, that's silly. No one is going to want to get DVDs or do streaming. Like, no, they want the experience of the store. And I think we all know how that turned out. I think Blockbuster has one store. I think Netflix is worth around, what is it, like $150 billion US? It's crazy what happened. And I love this example because it's a classic one, but it really shows you that for Blockbuster, they had the future in their hands. They had the opportunity to actually change the way they work, but they were too blind with what was in front of them. Let's talk about another one. Nokia. Nokia is one of these brands, especially in the US, huge. It was back in the early 2000s. Everybody had a Nokia flip phone. The Nokia Razr, I remember that was cool when I was a kid. You know, you'd have that ability. The thing is, Nokia, they loved their hard keyboards. They loved this kind of flip phone technology. You want to know this particular model of Nokia phone, you know what came out 2 weeks after this came out? The iPhone. The iPhone came out. And Nokia looked at that and they're like, yeah, but they want this. This is what our people want today. And now Nokia is it's a sub-bullet in a manuscript around what you used to use from technology. Whereas in Apple has changed now the way we work. Everybody's got some sort of device that replicates that. Things like the touchscreen technology. Again, another example where Nokia thought they had the future predicted. They thought they knew what their customers wanted, but they didn't. They didn't look to disrupt the industry. And then the final one, and this one's a fascinating one. I love this one. Is Kodak. So did you know that Kodak was the company that created the first digital camera? They did it in the 70s. 1976, I think it was. Their R&D department created the first digital camera. They were super excited about it. They went to their leadership and they said, hey, this is it. This is the future of camera. And they looked at it and they were like, it doesn't use film. Ooh, no, that's where all our money comes from. It's all comes from film. So now let's not worry about that. So they shelved it. Fast forward about another decade, middle of the 1980s, they come up with the first megapixel digital camera. So now this is actually not just a poor quality digital camera, it's actually a decent quality. And again, they presented this saying, the technology is changing. We have it right here. And again, their board says, nah, but it's not our business now. And of course, mid-2000s, Kodak, again, goes under because they couldn't get out of their own way. They had the future in their hands. They could have predicted the future, but they were too obsessed with what they were doing now. And so for me, when I look at examples like this, I think we really suck at predicting the future, right? Really poor at that. And that's to me why I think it's fun to experiment, to theorize around what the future is. I like having like maybe like a bourbon in my hand and talking about it over drinks. But to be practical, we need to think about how we work today. So at Atlassian, when we start thinking about this idea of how we work, this idea of modern work has come up. This is actually even where like my title, I'm a modern work coach. We decided to really lean into this because for us, modern work is about how we do it today. It's about how we think about how we get better today. And for us, we developed this idea of what we call a modern work manifesto. For us, these are principles that we follow at Atlassian to help us work better, and we actually want to share it with the world. It's a little insider tip. When we have our big team conference coming up this year here in Las Vegas, if you happen to go to it, you're going to hear a lot about this modern work manifesto. Because for us, we think this is what work is about. This is how you apply your tools because it changes how you work. So for me, I want to go over these 8 principles with you and talk a little bit what they mean, but then get you talking about it too. So we're going to do a little bit of an exercise with this as well. So let's dive into these 8 principles. So the first one we have is vocation over location. If the pandemic taught us anything, it's that work doesn't have to happen in a spot. It's not defined by a spot. It's defined by skills. It's defined by competence, by passion. That is how work is defined. And so for us, we say, and Atlassian, we're known for this, we say work in terms of where is flexible. Work where you do your best work. For Atlassian, we have offices all around the world. We still fill our offices with people, but we don't tell them to come into the office. We say, hey, if it makes sense, do it. And so we still see that more than 40% of our 12,000 employees live more than 2 hours away from any of our offices. And it's done intentionally because, again, we want to focus in on what you're doing, not where you're doing it. And so for us, that's why this is such an important thing to value. Now, anyone here familiar with the Agile Manifesto? Got a couple of people? You'll notice here I'm using this term over. In the Agile Manifesto, they emphasize this idea of, one thing over another. Not that we don't value the other thing, but we value the other one more. So for me, I value location. I value the chance to meet up with people. I'm spending the week with 2 Atlassians. It's fantastic. But that's not the important piece for us. So vocation over location. All right, now let's talk about the next one we have. Ooh, this is a classic. Outcomes over outputs. When I think about this, I think about tickets, and I think about stories, and I think about issues, and I think about backlogs, and I think, how many stories did you get done this week? How many tickets did you get through? And then it begs the question, does that measure actually matter? And sometimes maybe, but I would argue that most of the time it doesn't. Most of the time, that's counting the wrong thing. For us, we want to focus in on what's the goal behind this? What's the value we deliver? If you use something like OKRs, you use something like any sort of goal-setting technique, you know the outcomes are the goal. They're the idea of we made a measurable impact. And so for us, when we think about this, yes, we care about the work itself getting done, but the goal at the end of the day is that did we move the needle? Did we actually push something forward as an organization, as a team? All right, evolution over transformation. This one's a hot topic. So many organizations today, and I love the big consulting companies. So many organizations today have paid the big consulting companies millions and millions of dollars to come in and go through an agile and digital transformation. I'm not saying it wasn't helpful, but change doesn't happen in 16 months. Change is something that takes years. It's a constant process. And so to say that as we change the way we work, we can go through a transformation where we start at point A and we end at point Z is simply not realistic. For us, it's about making incremental changes, pivoting along the way. It's about going through and saying, hey, we've learned something. Let's evolve this direction now. Evolution is about following pathways versus a strict plan of moving forward. Again, not saying that something like a digital transformation isn't necessary, but we have to approach change the way change happens, and this is not how change happens. So for us, it's important to think about how we evolve change. Now let's talk about flow versus silos. Anyone feel like in their organization there's silos? Silos in your organization. You have one group not working with another, there we go. I think we all see that, especially if we're in technology. Where all of a sudden, you get the business team over here, you get the technology team, and you're like, the business team, they don't get it. The business team says technology, they're not delivering. That's what I call a silo, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? That's a silo, because guess what? We've got our own bubbles, and we're not willing to move out of them. So instead of focusing on, this is my space and this is your space, let's focus in on the flow of work. Let's focus in on actually how we move work across a value stream. We have this idea that we put out in our team playbook. Anyone here heard of our team playbook? Got a couple people. If you haven't heard of our team playbook, it's a free resource out there on Atlassian's website. Contains, I think, 53 different, we call them plays, that are activities that you can follow in your organization to help you work differently. Everything from how we make decisions to how we think about retrospectives, stuff like that. But one of my favorite plays is called a network of teams, because we believe work happens in a network. It's not about multiple parts of the business being lined up and this goes here and this goes here. It's like, no, it works across fluidly. Sometimes I'm working with this marketing group. Sometimes I'm working with HR. Then I'm going back to development. And it has to do with the relationships we have there. So for us, we want to focus on how do we smooth out that flow? How do we focus in on how we do that? Now, silos can be valuable when maybe you're in brand new greenfield development. You need focus. That makes sense. But long term, silos end up hindering our innovation more than it helps it. So it's something to, again, focus on how do we flow work across our organization. Context over content. So this is an interesting one. We've got some Confluence users in here. Anyone use Confluence? I'm guessing some of you do, right? It is an Atlassian tool. I'll tell you what, when I look at Confluence sometimes and some customers, it's hard to manage. There's so much information out there. And the problem is we haven't become intentful in terms of how that information is structured. We haven't figured out how do we actually use this? Because yes, we can create a page. Should we create a page? And so when I think about context over content is I can always be gathering more data. I can always be creating more objects. But are they in service to making a decision? Context is the connection of data points. It's the ability to do something with the data. So collecting that data is great, but does it aid me in the ability to actually make a decision in my organization? Does it speed up my decision making, help my leadership? One of the things we like to joke about is that in terms of content, we live in what we consider an age where we're experiencing data obesity. We have so much data. So how do we make sense of it? How do we avoid collecting everything? Because at the end of the day, it's all about how we use it, not the fact that we have it. Now, this is one that makes sense for us. Team over individual. I don't know about you, but I've been on some teams before where I have some really smart people, genius people. And some of these people don't want to play as a team. They don't want to be part of the group. And I would argue when that happens, what we experience is we actually experience the entire team slowing down. You might think you have the genius, the person who's the rock star, but if they're not willing to work with the group, all of a sudden, everybody slows down. Because at the end of the day, it's not how an individual works, it's how a team of individuals work together. And for us, when we think about this, it goes back to that old phrase. The total is greater than the sum of the individual parts. Knowing that when team members come together and they share those different skills, all of a sudden we can create something we couldn't have done on our own. And so for us, again, we value the individual. We value the skills you bring to the table. But it's only in concert with the team that it actually works effectively for our group. Ooh, better over bigger. This one's good because what I love about this one is that, again, we're in an age of trying to make the biggest of everything, right? We want to grow a company to be the biggest company. We want to make a product, have all the features, right? Instead of going and making sure we're everything, let's make sure we're focused and focus on the things that we're good at. Let's get better at those items. Let's be the best of something versus just to everyone. Because ultimately, if we try to be everything for everyone, we're going to be nothing to nobody. So for us, we want to focus on how do we get better as teams? How do we focus on those small little improvements? It might slow us down. It might not allow us to accomplish as much work as we used to, but it allows us to do the right work. And then I believe this is our last one here. We've got adaptability over adherence. I come from the agile coaching world. Spent about a decade coaching teams, working within groups. And what I would say the biggest skill that I saw out of a good team, a good scrum master, a good coach I would work with, is not their ability to follow the rules, follow Scrum, follow Kanban. It was to know when to break the rules. It was to when to know to say, you know what, does it make sense for us to do a daily Scrum right now as a team? It might not make sense because they don't understand the goal at the end of the day. And so for us, we want to focus on this idea of adapting how we work, adapting our ways of working to accommodate where we are at today. What have we learned along the way? It kind of goes back to that evolution over transformation. Because if we can adapt how we work, we can change. Adherence is just guardrails that says you have to stay in this lane, even though if that lane doesn't make sense. If we're driving down this road and we no longer need to go down that road, why are we still following that? So for me, it's focusing on, again, on those aspects of how do we know when to break the rules? How do we know when it's smart to actually go off and do that? So here are those 8 principles of what we consider the modern work manifesto. For us, this is guidelines for teams to live by, to work by. We want teams to be thinking about this. We want organizations to look at this and say, this is a novel way for us to approach work. Because instead of thinking about the future, let's think about how we solve these today. So as I promised you, I'm going to have you do a little bit of time working with each other. I'm a workshop guy. Actually, I love talking, but I hate talking because you're just paying attention to me versus having a conversation with each other, and that's the point of community in my mind. And so I want to do an exercise with you. So taking these 8 principles, what I want you to do is I'm going to get you into groups. I want you to find a partner. I want you to find somebody you can talk with. And I want you to look at these and say, based on my organization, based on maybe my team, which ones of these represent my superpower, which is the thing I'm good at, and which ones of these represent my kryptonite, the things maybe my organization is not good at. Maybe I'm really good at adaptability, but boy, context over content, we are terrible at it. And so what I'm going to do is I'll give you about 5 minutes to have that conversation, all right? So we're going to break up into groups. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. I want you to figure out what's your superpower, and then what's your kryptonite? What's the thing you're bad at? What are you good at when it comes to the modern work manifesto, all right? Cool. Find a buddy. Everyone find a pal. All at once, right? We got our partners. We got our partners. All right, go for it. You got 5 minutes. All right, let's bring it back in one last time. Let's bring it back in. Go ahead, throw on those headsets. And let's do a little debrief here. So I'm kind of curious. You don't have to share a lot, but I'd love to hear what were some of the things you talked about in terms of how you would turn your kryptonite into your superpower? What would it take? I was kind of curious. What were some of the things you talked about? What would you need to do? Oh, there we go. What we have? I'll go around. Oh, wait, we got it back here. Training and exercise the culture, right? Sometimes it takes us something as simple as saying, let's talk about it and actually train you on it. Again, culture is something that gets reinforced. We train people on it. We go back and we go back again. What's another thing? What's another thing you could do to help change that kryptonite into a superpower? Understand each other's objectives. It's amazing, and when I would work with executives particularly, it's amazing how often that so many of these get missed on executives because sometimes it's just not their language. It's not something that they understand fully. And so when I sit down, I'm like, let me understand where you're coming from and what you need. A lot of the times, what they actually need overlaps with this. They want outcomes over outputs. They just sometimes don't know how to measure outcomes. So if we figure out how to measure it with them, then they're all about like, yes, I want the value. It's not about the widgets being delivered. It's about the value. All right, one last. What's one more? What does he got?
He said that to improve the team over individual, people should start talking, training communication, training how to expose themselves, train how to talk to each other, you know?
I love that. So one of the things we have, I mentioned the team playbook. One of my favorite plays in there, actually two of my favorite plays that helps with that, getting from what I would consider an individual to a team mentality is one, we call it a user manual. User manuals are about sharing who I am and what I need as a person. So it focuses on the individual. It's a great tool to get to know people and build empathy with people. And then from a user manual, I then transition into a working agreement. Working agreements are how do we take a group of individuals and have them get explicit around how they want to work together as a team. So when you mix those two together, it's fantastic. You get empathy for people. You get empathy for each other, and then you run the working agreement as a way to say, now how do we want to work together? Because now I understand what you need, and you understand what I need. Now we're going to figure out what we need. So, love that. So, what I want you to do is really think about these conversations you had. Because at the end of the day, I want you to remember that, you have the tools. You're here because you're passionate about the products that we use, the practices that we follow. So we have the tools. We have the techniques. We have those practices. We know how, just from our conversations, how we could approach change in our organization. And so now we have all this. It's up to you to bring about the change in modern work. You're the one that needs to go out there and champion now these 8 principles. Be the ones that demonstrate. I always say that the companies that have great values are the ones that enact those values. They're the ones that demonstrate those day to day versus the ones that espouse to them, saying, I want to be like this, but I don't do that. So with modern work, it's all about the practical today. It's about following those today. So again, you have that ability. So yes, I want you to go out there, take those things that you just talked about, those things that you would do to turn your kryptonite into your superpower, and experiment with your team. Try it out. With that said, folks, one last thing I like to share is that dysfunction is the gap between what you know and what you apply. If you know what you've got to do, if you know you've got to go work on your teamwork, if you don't do anything about it, simply dysfunctional. So go out there and try something. Experiment with it. That's the goal. Remember, evolution over transformation. And with that said, that's all I got. I appreciate you all. Thank you so much for your time. That's my QR code for my LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me. I also like to share my email. I forgot to put it on here, but mcruth@atlassian.com. It's my first initial, last name. If you ever need anything, my role is to help our customers, our community, with how we work. And like I said, we've got people in Sao Paulo here who are focused on that too. So we can get you connected with the right people. So, yeah. Thank you all for your time. I appreciate you.